trying to answer questions that you guys may have. We're going to talk about how to get into big tech and if you even want to. So firstly, welcome. Secondly, thank you to Carter. I think that was a great presentation. So thank you for that. Basically, let's start with background, who I am. We're going to go over day-to-day of what it means being a software engineer at big tech. I'm going to go over interview process, what that means, and then some advice for you guys. So first, I'm Sparsh. Let's talk about experience. I'm a software engineer on the ML monetization team at Google. Basically, I work on using traditional ML to provide recommendations for the sign-up flow for Workspace. So basically trying to reduce some friction for signing up, directly revenue generating for Google as well, and also try to provide discounts for preventing downgrades and stuff like that. Before that, I worked at Capital One. I also worked in the ML space there in card fraud. So kind of, touching a little bit of the, card fraud detection and prevention. And I actually got a patent there for my work in distributed systems. And then other than that, I'm also pursuing my master's at Columbia in machine learning. So kind of machine learning focus here and there. That is actually one piece of advice I would say as well is Carter was talking about it earlier. Is AI and all this stuff going to replace software engineering? I would say, putting in my 2 cents, I would also say no, like how Yassine said. So that's kind of my perspective early on. I'm also doing some research here and there under my professors in my master's. I think that's been really valuable. But in general, I would say that a lot of the work I've done in terms of my experience has been for trying to create that robust resume, trying to become more appealing for interviews as well. So I know exactly where many of you are coming from as well. Trying to build out your career. There's a lot of unknowns, and I really relate to that problem. Okay, so is big tech for you? So I'm a software engineer at Google, like I mentioned, but that comes with its trade-offs, right? Something to consider. There's a lot of, I have some notes here. So there's pros and cons to both things, right? Of course, the initial assumption is just, okay, want to go to big tech, want to make big bucks. There's a lot of praise associated with big tech as well, of course, yeah. But what are the kind of drawbacks and trade-offs that you need to consider? First being, I would say, the expectations are a lot greater. Growth can be slower. Impact, of course, is broad, but it's often very specific. And, you also have to think about, internal tooling is really good. So you might not be getting all of the experience in many of the open source technologies. It's often better for more experienced people at times as well, because, people who join later in their career, and onboarding is often very documentation driven and there isn't much handholding. Okay, so if those things are terrifying, it makes sense because that was how I was as well, right? You don't get much handholding. It's a lot of you get kind of thrown in. When I started, like I mentioned, at Capital One, it was really different because I was part of a rotational program. There's a lot more handholding. You get a lot more leeway to make mistakes, ask stupid questions. And of course, there's some of that here as well. But, you have to get used to being a lot more self-reliant in a sense. But if that's appealing to you, and it is to many people, like myself included, being more self-reliant also has its advantages. You have a lot more independence. Everybody around you is super smart, right? Because like-minded people attract like-minded people. And then, there's a lot of perks. Food at, free food all the time, all the nice campuses, massages during the day. I just go lay down in one of the office rooms if I want. You have a lot more freedom in that sense, where your work is your responsibility. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what the interview process looks like. Most of you are probably pretty familiar with this, but just to kind of go over why, assuming that that is something you want to do, this is what it looks like. So first you would have something like a phone screen. And this goes back to like, if you have a robust resume and you're applying, then, you have you will probably get reached out to automatically or something, or, it might be a more direct process. You have a phone screen with a recruiter. These are non-technical people. You really don't need to show off too much because they're going to be impressed regardless. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of a prejudice, but, and then typically there'll be 5+ rounds, many interviews, and then some companies will do team match, whereas some other companies, like for example, Microsoft, Snapchat, they will actually, when you're interviewing, you're actually interviewing for a specific team. And I'm sure, I know that the next presenter or one of the presenters who's with us, Ume, will have more perspective on that as well. But basically, for my kind of experience, right, I went through the interview process in a very specific language called Golang, where you don't have a lot of the package support that you may in like Java. So my interview preparation process looked like going through and in Golang, implementing every single one of the data structures from scratch. And just, in the interview itself, I actually interviewed in Golang as well for all of my interviews. I used Golang and I would have to code up the data structure while I'm trying to solve the problem. So I would first like go through the process of, actually solving the problem, writing notes, explaining my thought process. And then when it came down to coding, not only was I coding out the problem, but I was coding out the data structures as well. And that's, I think, the coding part is easy, right? Because all that is just putting pen to paper. And if you've done it, a few times, like you can just do it. And that's one of those automatic things. Like, for example, setting up a testing framework, you can just do it during the process, even if they're not asking you to. And for me, I didn't really do a lot of the leak coding, but I did do I used almost interviews to prepare for interviews. So I just applied widely. And then when I would get an interview, I would take that interview and take it to as many rounds as I can. And that was my preparation process. And I ended with, 5 or 6 offers, all over like 250,000 when I was interviewing for Google. So what would my advice be to a young professional or a early career person looking to make a switch? So first, I would say build your skills. And what I mean by this is what I said earlier is like, try to build your resume, do personal projects, like try to expand your skills in a specific tech stack, for example, try to learn a unique language, try to learn a niche skill and maybe it's not strictly necessary to have research experience. I've found it's an easy way to do research and work in a project that you didn't actually come up with, which happens to be very complex and is like cutting edge and stuff. And you can deliver impact and you can claim it and it looks really good on your resume as well. So if you have opportunities, seek those out for research. Second, I would say learn the problem, not the solution. This goes back to what I was saying. Like instead of learning, for example, like two-sum, learn the binary search algorithm. Or like instead of learning maybe Postgres, learn a relational database. Instead of learning maybe like, instead of, I guess, staying high level, maybe learning like the time and space complexity for like a specific algorithm, try to figure out why it is the way it is. Like, why is that, like you have an array list. Why is lookup O of 1? Because it's amortized. What does that mean? Because it's actually like, it's in under the hood what's going on for giving us that optimal memory, right? That speed. Lastly, the 70% rule. And this goes down to like self-selection. And maybe this is a bit of projecting, but I know that I was in, you guys' situation at one point. And for me, there was a lot of self-selection. So you kind of cut yourself out of opportunities because you think that you don't have the skills to be able to get it, or like, oh, I need to do this left field thing before I can apply to this thing. And that's not really fair to yourself. Like, I know that's there's a silly quote, right? Like the you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and that's so true. So the 70% rule is basically saying if you see a job application and you fulfill 70% of the criteria, apply. Just apply. And this is also a rule that's meant to be broken. It's more of a rule of thumb. If you don't meet 70%, still apply. I mean, who cares, right? Like you have to put yourself out there in that sense, and you can't self-select out of your own opportunities. It's like blocking your blessings. I know that's like a saying. So yeah, that's pretty much the advice that I have. That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. I actually, I want to just jump into a couple of things, and I'm going to ask you one question, actually two questions. First question is, you said you have multiple offers. What were the offers that you had?
I had Snapchat. I had one at Argo AI. I don't remember all of them. It was like, so I've had 3.5 years of experience at this point, and that was like damn near 2 years ago. But all of these companies actually, Argo AI ended up going under. So I mean, that's unfortunate. So I'm glad I didn't go with that choice. And yeah, and there were a couple others like Microsoft, and I chose Google because it fit me culturally. Everybody I talked to was like really nice. So
Amazing, man. The other question I had is, are you doing anything on the side, or do you have like any? What
yeah,
keeps you up at night, man?
yeah. So I have been actually I've been working a little bit on a I've been piloting this application. It's more of a hyper local social media for music. Basically, it lets you see what music other people are listening to nearby, of course, that they choose to share, and it lets you interact with them. So it's kind of a way to kind of build local communities. And I'm currently piloting it, so that'll be something that's coming up soon.